9.
The Radio Wammo Breakfast.
Jeff Dudas from underwatertimes.com.
Editor of Underwater Times joining us in Miami. G'day there, Jeff. How are you?
Doing great. How are you doing?
Very, very well, thank you. First up, of course, the silly news, of course, about Paul the octopus. He has passed away.
Yes, and this is Paul. If you remember, it's a sporting legend. It's like a lot of sporting legends. He sort of came out of nowhere. There was a major tournament, and he sort of transcended the tournament, became a superstar. And this is, of course, during the 2010 World Cup.
Yeah.
He came to fame, and this was Paul the octopus. And Paul was a resident of the Oberhausen Sea Life Center in West Germany. And he started predicting the outcome of the games, and this is for the German matches. And as it went, he predicted correctly all the matches for Germany. And then, of course, during the finals, he predicted Spain's victory. He won 8 for 8 during the 2010 World Cup. They started calling him a psychic octopus.
And, of course, scientifically, he predicted nothing, right?
Well, that's I was actually reading up on. He has a page on Wikipedia,
of course,
and it's like 62 references to it. But I was reading up on it, and they said perhaps because of supposedly it was a common octopus. Supposedly they can't tell colors, so maybe it was the intensity of the flags that he was picking. But it was I'm trying to think now, a scallop or something. They would be in either both of these little acrylic boxes, and he would go one to the other, and he always picked the right one. And
but I mean, I guess if there was anything good to come from this, rather than just the silliness, I suppose is that octopuses. That we now know what a little bit more about octopuses. I think as the public, rather than scientists.
Right. Supposedly very intelligent creatures. Who knows how intelligent? There was a story this week wondering how their brains work, and perhaps they have brains in each one of their arms or parts of brains. So they're very, very intelligent creatures. And like you said, highlights a little bit of the sea life. And
that they don't live that long either.
No, there's supposedly about 2 years, and he died just about right on time. If you believe the stats.
And I mean, do they actually start looking old and getting old, or they just suddenly go 2 years is up, expire?
Well, they said he stopped eating, so they suspected. I guess when you stop eating and you're an octopus, in about 2 years, that your time's up.
Okay. All right. Well, on to something completely different here. The vacuum cleaner is made up of recycled sea garbage.
Yeah, and it's an interesting story. I often don't do product plugs and such, but this one I thought is a very special story out of Sweden, and this is Electrolux has made a special run of vacuum cleaners, and their shell of the vacuum cleaner is designed 100% from plastics recovered from the ocean.
Huh.
And they went around collecting this from all over the world, and they released 5 of these vacuums, one from the Pacific, one from the Baltic, I think one from Thailand. So from all over, they collected these unique, bits of plastic from the ocean. Unfortunately, it's not very hard to collect plastic in the ocean. It's all over. I mean, if you go to the most remote parts of the world, these little islands, 1,000 miles away from humans, there's plastic everywhere. So they're highlighting this and trying to bring attention, but also to try to figure out something to do with this plastic. And it's sort of ironic in a sense. Plastic on land, recycled plastic, is actually very hard to find. So it's hard to do this actually to get recycled plastic. But from the oceans, it's very easy to find, but it's almost impossible to use because it's been degraded and it's actually contaminated with just stuff from the ocean. So they're trying to.
I sometimes wonder, because we do a lot of recycling here in New Zealand, but I sometimes wonder what happens to that plastic at the end of the day, and does it get recycled, and does it end up in new products?
Well, supposedly it does, and if you reading this article, they say they can actually use all this sort of consumer waste, but the things that have been thrown out from ships and washed out to the sea, you can't really use, and so that's what they're working on, and they're actually going to auction these vacuums and raise money for more research into this to plow the money back in and see if they can figure out a way to do something with all this plastic that's in the ocean.
So do they look like vacuum cleaners made out of recycled material?
Actually, they're very cool. So, as cool as recycled plastic can be. But the shells of them, so they molded it, the shells of the vacuum from all these plastics. So each of these areas they collect it from sort of has its own unique signature of plastic garbage. So if you look at it, I think one from Thailand had an old shoe molded into it with a bunch of other things, and the one from the Pacific was little tiny plastic bits that have been ground up and bleached and such. So, as it is all over the world, there's different types of plastic trash floating around.
Well, that's a very cool story. Well, Jeff, finally, it must have been rating times for this particular radio station in Australia, but some Aussie radio hosts have been talking underwater.
Yes, and this is out of Sydney. Jonesy and Amanda went on the air with the Guinness World Book of Records right there with them, and they set the world record for underwater broadcast, which, as it turns out, you have to be underwater for 3 hours and sort of do your normal show. And sure enough, they pulled that off, and now they're have their own world record.
What were they using? Scuba diving gear, or?
They were scuba diving gear. They were at the Great Barrier Reef habitat at the Sydney Aquarium, about 10, or I think it was about 13 feet underwater, and in their little suits. And this is actually a real live tank, so they were like sharks. I think there were 8 or 10 sharks floating around there, and plus all the fish, and doing their stories and doing their show underwater.
Some radio stations will go to all kinds of lengths and create all kinds of stunts for ratings. That's for sure.
It's crazy. I'm sure you can imagine, but
yeah. Thanks very much, Jeff. We appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
And those stories you'll find over at underwatertimes.com.